Hao Hong is a CIO of Lotus Asset Management and joins me around the set here. Hao, a very good morning and thanks for joining us today. Let's talk through what we're seeing in the markets here. Fractional gains for the Chinese markets. Of course, everybody was bracing for the risk off yesterday, given all of the developments in the trade war between China and U.S. What do you make of what's happening right now?
Yeah, well, I think people are still hesitant to put their money to work, because there's obviously unforeseen event that is happening, right? So people are still waiting to see the results coming out of the APEC summit, which is only 2 weeks away. I think right now, because the market had a tremendous run, many of the growth stocks had a tremendous run this year, especially the names in mainland market, right? So many of them is more than double. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, people want to take some money off the table first, and wait until the uncertainty settle, and then both sides are not supposed to add on more sanctions, right? So before the summit. So this is clearly a violation of the spirits in Madrid, and therefore, China thinks there is a need to retaliate before the meeting. So I think they're posturing, and also China is showing what it can play with its cards, and rare earth is a key component for almost anything, right? So therefore, I think right now we are still waiting to see what's going to happen.
We heard from Treasury Secretary Bessent that substantial communications between the U.S. and China over the weekend, and staff-level meetings are continuing to happen in Washington with the sidelines of the World Bank as well as IMF annual meetings. I'm curious to know that are we seeing the U.S. side kind of pull back a little bit? Have they backed down? Is this a sign of taco deals?
Well, most of us is betting on a tackle again. So, I think last night the news come up. Basically the U.S. side is actually softening its stance, right? So it's trying to de-escalate as well. The Chinese side yesterday we're seeing a stronger reference rate, which is not trying to weaponize the Chinese yuan for exports, which is also a good sign. And also over the weekend the Ministry of Commerce actually come out and sort of clarified a few things, saying that export control is not export ban, etc., etc. So I think both sides are seeing a clear benefit to de-escalate the situation leading up to the summit.
China did not respond with a retaliatory tariff, bringing it back to, what is it now, 100% plus 30 for the United States. Yeah. China stands at just 10% right now. Is this a sign that China doesn't need a trade deal?
I think China didn't sort of slap on additional tariff as a sign not to escalate the situation much further from here. And also, the Donald Trump's, the tackle deal basically saying that, you want to levy 100% additional tariff on Chinese goods. Now, if that's the case, right, I think the U.S. economy will be the first to collapse, not China. Right, the U.S. is now the third largest trading partner. It's no longer the largest trading partner with China. Right, so even though the volume is still humongous, right, but we're still talking about a decrease in importance in the overall Chinese exports to the U.S. as a destination. And also, if you slap on 100%, right, so I think the U.S. consumer would suffer tremendously, and so on. So I think the U.S. has a lot more to lose if the U.S. continue to use a tariff, as a weapon, in this negotiation.
I believe only 10% of Chinese total exports now are bound for the United States. Given all of these different policy moves, how does that impact your investment decisions?
Well, I think for now we're actually staying away from the U.S. names for now. Reason being, even though we're seeing probably further upside from here for the U.S. names, but given the level of valuation and the level that is an all-time high, the U.S. indices, and also what's going on between China and the U.S. So we're actually taking some profits on the U.S. names, but we remain fully invested in the Chinese names.
Okay, you're taking profits. Any particular industries that you still would be mindful and watching out for? AI, for example.
Yes. The US AI names are just going banana, really, right? So, it's risen multiple times this year, right? So I think, towards the end of this year, now we're towards the end of this year. So it probably pays to lock in some gains, just in case. And then at the same time, the Chinese AI names are still cheap, right? So many of the Chinese chip names, Chinese cloud computing names, they're still relatively cheap. For example, Alibaba is still trading at about 20 times PE. Tencent is about less than 20 times. So I think these names actually offer better value for the Chinese investors than the U.S. names. And besides that, we're also looking at the material sector. Right? So for example, the non-ferrous metal that is starting to having a good run recently, such as copper, aluminum, etc., and also the precious metal sector as well.
You mentioned Alibaba, and I got a chance to speak with Chairman Joe Tsai at the weekend. We were out there in Macau for the NBA. He, of course, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets as well. I got a chance to speak to him about artificial intelligence. And earlier on, we had heard from them at their cloud conference talking about an expansion of investment into AI. But Joe Tsai has clarified and says that $53 billion is the figure for them for the next 3 years. In terms of artificial intelligence, the outlook for China, what do you see?
Yeah. Well, firstly, compliance disclaimer, I have a position in Alibaba. So, okay, let's put that aside. I think, the AI future for China is bright in the sense that, China is actually going a different route from the U.S. The U.S. is basically going a proprietary route. Basically everything is in-house. If you want our technology, you have to get a license, blah. So the Chinese is an open source option, basically inviting all the brilliant minds in the world to participate in AI development. And we're seeing clear results, right? So earlier this year, we've had a DeepSeek moment, right? So the moment actually is a moment that China sort of, show that it's capable of developing its own LLM on its own. And then I think later on, more than a month ago, basically Alibaba come up and say, we have this LLM model that rivals OpenAI's latest model, and we're actually showing achievements in chip making, right? So some of the chips that they were able to demonstrate on their annual event rival the capability of the NVIDIA chips, right? So I think it's a really tremendous achievement there. So it's actually showing that China is going a different way, and so far we have something to show for this route. So I think going forward, obviously the two countries are probably separating further and further. So I think it's right now it's still very difficult to judge who's going to win out. I think both sides is a viability in the sense that the open source route is more or less the same as the Android, the Google Android system, and the proprietary route that the U.S. is pursuing is similar to the Apple closed system.
We're also watching the electric vehicle sector, which has seen significant growth, but now some signs of weakness in BYD. Their latest sales figures showing a drop compared with the previous month, whereas Geely, Leapmotor, and XPeng showing record sales for the month. What's happening in the EV space?
Yeah. I think many of the Chinese EV manufacturers are actually selling cars for like 100 yuan per profit, right? Many of them are actually making a loss. So there's a severe overcapacity issue in the sector. Now, having said that though, in the past couple of years, EV is one of the sectors that's actually supporting Chinese growth, right? So especially during COVID years when we have a property sector coming down really fast, right? So the property investment in the country is down like very high double digit year on year for consecutively 4 or 5 years now, right? So we actually need a new source of growth for Chinese economy. And I think EV is one of the sectors that have been propping up growth in the sense that the Chinese government and Chinese businessmen are actually putting in tremendous amount of capital to develop the EV industry. Now that the industry is sort of quite mature, right? So we're so mature that we actually have a lot of excess capacity in the system, right? So then we start to export this capacity, right? So to Southeast Asia, cars are selling really well. To Europe, I heard that all the EVs on the road in Europe is Chinese made, and I think Beamer's, Mercedes-Benz is having a tough time, right? But even so, I think the foreign demands may not be able to absorb all the excess capacity that China has. So some capacity reduction has to be in place going forward, to see the sector coming back to profitability. But having said that, I think all the leading EV manufacturers are still making decent money, right? So NIO is probably going to turn profitable this year. Xiaopeng XPeng is doing well. So I would say that for the leading steers is the opportunity to consolidate the industry, right? So to get rid of the excess capacity, to grab market share from the unprofitable competitors, and therefore it's actually something to gain for the industry leaders.
One last question is about the low altitude economy. Coming up, I'm going to be speaking with Yihang, which is a company that makes these exact devices, or I'm not sure what I should call them. But in terms of China's 15th five-year plan, in terms of growth for the economy, is this one of their priorities, the low altitude economy?
There has been a lot of talk about it, but nobody talks about the safety issue, and also the low altitude economy, whether there's a sort of a national security issue as well, right? So because these days, if you want to fly a drone in China, you have to ask for permission, right? So to do that. So it's a very good concept. When we were kids, we read about science fiction about people flying in the sky, and that's becoming reality. So I think there's a huge space there. But once we take care of the national security and also the permission to fly on low altitude space, then probably there would be a tremendous boom from there.
Yeah, it's like the cartoon that I watched growing up, the Jetsons, right? They are flying around. That's right. Hao Hong, thank you very much for your time today. We've been